Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
True crime with a dash of the paranormal, the garish, the strange, and the darkly comic. I'm Zevon Odelberg, and you've found your way to Kinda Murdery, a place that means more than just murder. It's my very own pocket dimension, home to a curated collection of bizarre and compelling stories. The unsolved, the unsettling, and the unbelievable. I cover it all, just so long as it's kinda murdery. Hey everybody, welcome to this Sunday edition of Kinda Murdery. I'm your host, Zevon Odelberg. Thank you for deciding to be right here with me. Alright, so you all know why we're here. We're here for part 2 of Killer Couple, Natural Born Lovers, Dale Jones and Marjie Dean. And look, I'm not going to fiddle fart around here. We're going to get right into it. Just a quick recap. If you'll remember from Thursday, the Jones-Lewis bandit gang is on the verge of breaking up because of vicious infighting among several of Dale's men over who ought to have the right to be in love with Eva Lewis. As for Eva Lewis herself, well, she's head over heels in love with Dale Jones, which renders the rest of his men's acrimony pointless. But what's not pointless, of course, is that our title girl, Marjie Dean, is also deeply in love with Dale, which leads to white-hot, furious conflict between the two women, even a hair-pulling catfight over who owns the right to first place in Dale's heart. The whole thing's a mess, really. The most accomplished band of bank and train robbers in American history, the Led Zeppelin, the Beatles of bandits, is about to break up like a high school grad at the end of summer. Everybody's just freaking pissed off at each other, and the gang's future cohesion teeters on a knife's edge. So that's right where we are. As always, I'll rewind the story just a little bit to let you drop into the narrative. You ready? 'Cause I am. And look, I know I called the Jones-Lewis gang the Beatles of bandits, but this is a murder story, and we're gonna find out for whom the bell tolls. Never mind, let's rock and roll. Come with me, and let's heavy metal. Kinda Murdery starts now. For 3 days, neither Jones nor Cheryl nor Odelberg dared close an eye in sleep or turn their backs to one another for fear of being shot. So fierce were the fires of hatred that flamed in their souls. Dale Jones had complete control over the best bank-robbing bandit gang in United States history, and then his new common-law wife, Marjie Dean, and more to the point, Eva Lewis, the gorgeous cabaret younger sister of Dale's partner, Frank, shows up in camp, and suddenly Dale is afraid to go to sleep because either Odelberg or Cheryl might kill him or each other. That's how much and how quickly morale had deteriorated. So they dared not close an eye or turn their backs to each other for fear of being shot. So fierce were the fires of hatred that flamed in their souls. And each day, Jones expected his subjects in crime to turn on him, with all the hatred and ferocity with which a wolf pack attacks its leader. This condition could not last. And Dale, knowing this and realizing that action would have to be provided for his men, gave the order to break camp, placing George Odelberg, Blackie, and Roy Cheryl in the car which had been driven to the camp by Eva Lewis, and, climbing into the larger machine, with Frank Lewis and the two women, Dale Jones drove out of the hills with his bandits. He went to Kansas City, establishing headquarters in a house on Wyandotte Street. Disguised as a woman, Dale, who was indeed a very pretty man, and I will post pictures of the entire gang to Instagram so you can see what all these folks really looked like. They are real, pretty incredible American villains. Disguised as a woman, Dale would walk to town each day, loitering in hotel lobbies and even in the vicinity of the police headquarters, picking up the threads of conversation here and there relative to the Jones-Lewis bandits. I wonder if this is the real story that inspired Some Like It Hot, the famous movie with Marilyn Monroe where the criminals dress up like women. Who's to say? I'll have to look into that. Moving on. Jones visited his old hangout where Maddie Howard still reigned as queen, and here Jones was reminded of an agreement he had once made with the girl with the agate eyes. That's what they called Matty Howard. Rendered reckless by his long run of luck eluding the police, Dale informed Matty he was ready to carry out his part of the bargain. The agreement was that Jones should aid Matty in robbing a wealthy Kansas City jeweler who, the girl said, should be good for $50,000. "I've got him worked up to just the right pitch," Matty told Jones when he met her to plan the job. She referred to Joseph Marino, importer of fine jewelry, the man she had been planning to rob for more than a year. Apparently, Matty was right, for when she called at the office of Marino the next day to arrange a little party at the jeweler's home that night, Marino was joyous. "Sure, we'll stage a party, and I'll bring along the jewels you've been wanting to see," Marino assured the girl with the agate eyes. The party, in quotes, took place at the home of Marino on the night of May 25th, 1918. 2 women, in quotes, attended. 2 days later, the body of Joseph Marino was found in his home, hanging at the end of a strand of baling wire. His head had been crushed by a blow with a champagne bottle. A black porter who worked for Marino had been at the jeweler's home when the party first started. He recognized Matty Howard and identified the other woman as the original of a rogues gallery picture of Dale Jones. A long chase that extended over half the United States followed, with a pair of agate eyes as its object. Matty Howard, finally, was captured in Memphis, Tennessee, and returned to Kansas City, where she stood trial for murder. She was convicted and sentenced to serve 12 years in the Jefferson City Penitentiary. She made a model prisoner and was paroled in May 1928. After the murder of Marino, Jones ordered his men to scatter, he himself going to Colorado, leaving Marjie Dean and Eva Lewis behind. The newspapers stated that he was suspected of being Matty Howard's accomplice in murdering the jeweler. Eva returned to St. Louis, and it was while she waited in that city for the reorganization of the gang that she received the letters from Jones, which were published in Kansas City papers following her arrest later for highway robbery. One of these letters particularly has aided a great deal to shed some light on the other side of Dale Jones the Bandit. Here it is, a letter from Dale Jones to Eva Lewis. "Dearest one, a word or two to let you know how things are. Had a big rain back here and roads are somewhat bad. How are you, little girl? Will never forget the night I left you. You were crying, sweetheart, and I wanted to do something, but I could not. Everything is okay back here. Don't think it will be long until I will be with you again. Don't worry, darling, for things have a way of righting themselves. My regards to Ma. Tell her of my yearnings for some of those bacon and egg combinations. Yes, ma'am. Well, dear heart, time presses, so I must close. Hope my love is well. Goodbye." Just how the other members of the gang spent the weeks that elapsed between May 25th and the early part of July, when the men were banded together again, is not known. But Jones, after fleeing to Colorado, certainly fared well, living the easy life of a retired financier. But Jones, who apparently, by the way, is a very charming, inveterate ladies' man who was simultaneously seeing Eva Lewis, Marjie Dean, and of course we know the Kansas City crime boss and femme fatale, Matty Howard, was in love with him as well. Dale Jones, after fleeing to Colorado, certainly fared well, living the easy life of a retired financier. He had sent for Marjie Dean shortly after reaching the Mountain Lodge in Colorado, where he settled down to wait for the police to forget the Marino deal. Marjie Dean and Dale Jones were enjoying themselves thoroughly on the proceeds of a dozen bank robberies. All 6 of the men, as well as 2 women, met in the same house on Wyandotte Street on July 4th. This day was chosen by Jones because he knew that the city would be turned topsy-turvy for celebrants of the holiday, thus reducing the chances of being detected. On that day, Jones told the members of his gang of the new plans he had been laying. He was going to direct them into an altogether new field, he told his subjects, one that would net greater hauls with less danger of being killed by some fool bank employee. The new line would be passenger trains. He already had one job lined up, Jones informed his crew. The 5 men who looked to Dale Jones as their leader in crime and the man who made it possible for them to reap rich harvests in loot, accepted the explanation Jones gave them for wanting to rob trains instead of banks. Only one of the 7 persons present who had gathered around the 22-year-old bandit to receive orders knew that Dale Jones lied when he told his followers that train robbing involved less danger of death than bank robbing. That person was Marjie Dean. She knew that Dale Jones' reason for changing from one kind of robbery to another was the youth's innate craving for more and more excitement. The excitement of crouching in the darkness near some lonely railroad switch waiting for the glare of a locomotive headlight to appear around a long bend. and listening for the first low rumbling that would announce the approach of his prey. The excitement of boarding the train when it stopped on a siding or at a water tank, when he herded the passengers into frightened groups and watched them scuttle for cover when his gun belched flame as he shot a hanging light from the ceiling of the car. Dale Jones wanted to rob a passenger train according to the rules of the Old West, the West which gave to the country such notorious characters as Jesse James, Henry Starr, Cole Younger, Doc Stewart, and Al Jennings. So at midnight, July 10, 1918, on a siding near Coke, Kansas, the Texas Special, or MK&T passenger train number 27, MK&T of course stands for Missouri, Kansas, and Texas, pulled out of Kansas City at 9 o'clock. It thundered through Coke at midnight, and a few seconds later pulled into a siding near that small Kansas town to let the northbound train pass. The northbound Limited thundered over the rails past number 27 and disappeared into the night, and the Texas Special hissed as the engineer slowly let in his throttle. The safety valve on the huge locomotive popped as the first complaining groan of the driving wheels announced that the Texas Special was about to get underway again, its headlight beam shooting in the general direction of Galveston, Texas, the scheduled destination of the train. Then, out of the shadows leapt somber figures. One climbed rapidly into the engine cab. It was Dale Jones. R.E. Carter, the fireman, took in the situation at a glance. A fireman being, of course, the person who feeds coal or wood or whatever the train is burning into the firebox to create the steam to drive the train. All right, let's rewind to the start of the action. Then, out of the shadows leapt somber figures. One climbed rapidly into the engine cab. It was Dale Jones. R.E. Carter, the fireman, took in the situation at a glance. He reached behind him for his gun. A loud report came from the direction of the bandit, and the fireman dropped to his knees, clutching his left ankle, broken by a bullet from Dale's gun. "All right, give her the gun," came the sharp order directed at the engineer, who was still sitting on his seat, his hands elevated to a point where his fingertips brushed against the top of the cab. Jones had not spoken a word when he climbed into the engine cab. His anticipated command for the engine crew to "stick 'em up" having been checked when he was obliged to shoot the fireman. His order to the engineer to set the locomotive in motion was barked out after a quick glance toward the rear of the train and receipt of the signal from Knight that the baggage and mail cars had been uncoupled. Meanwhile, Odelberg had already gained entrance to the mail car and was standing in the center, his gun covering the clerk, who was leaning against the ladder boxes, both hands extended ceilingward. The Katy Flyer stops on a siding that the northbound Limited may pass. Now the road is clear for the Flyer to resume her thundering way to Texas. The engineer's hand reaches for the throttle. A vague form, out of the shadow of the water tower, leaps into the engine room. The veteran fireman, quick to think and quick to act, reaches for his gun. But Dale Jones is quicker. He always is. The fireman crumples, his ankle broken by the bandit's bullet. While Jones barks staccato commands to the locomotive engineer, another drama unfolds itself at the rear end of the train. Covered by an automatic leveled at his head by one of the train robbers, the unfortunate clerk in the mail car stands helpless, hands stretched upwards. The train started forward just as several pistol shots were heard above the hissing of the steam in the locomotive. Frank Lewis, Blackie Lancaster, and Sherrill were raiding the passenger coaches. E.C. Weicker, the train auditor, made a move that looked as if he was reaching for a gun. Blackie immediately clipped the auditor in the thigh with a bullet. All three bandits were firing. One bullet struck a woman passenger, Mrs. L.D. Williams of Oklahoma, in the shoulder. Having completed his work of uncoupling the mail and baggage cars from the rest of the train, leaving these still coupled to the engine, Knight ran back along the side of the train to join the three men who were going through the chair cars. Marjie Dean was also busy. She could be seen flitting through the mass of trembling humanity that a few moments before had been peacefully sleeping. Federal authorities who worked on the case during the next few months still are unable to explain how the robbery of the 2 baggage cars and 3 chair cars of the Texas Special was accomplished so quickly and so thoroughly by Dale Jones and his men. There were only 6 men and a woman actually engaged in pulling the robbery that night, and 2 of these are known to have ridden with the uncoupled engine and baggage cars to a switch 2 miles south of the siding on which number 27 stopped. This left only 5 persons to hold up and search more than 100 passengers riding in 3 coaches, an operation executed with startling ingenuity. How did they do it is the question that post office inspectors are still asking themselves, in spite of the fact that the robbery was explained in great detail by the members of the gang after their arrest and conviction. The plans for the train robbery formulated by Jones while he was in Colorado were the most elaborate ever worked out by a bandit leader. They called for a great deal of shooting while the bandits were boarding the train to overawe the train crew and the passengers and give an impression of a raid participated in by many more persons than were actually present. Once aboard the passenger coaches, no member of the gang was to remain in one place long enough to be singled out as one of the robbers, but was warned by Jones to be constantly on the move, working in and out among the passengers. Each of them was instructed to shout often to the others, calling one another by numbers from 1 to 13, which would leave the victims to believe that the bandits numbered at least 13 men. Like every other robbery committed by the Jones gang during the several years that the band of crooks spread terror throughout the Southwest, the holdup of the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas passenger train went without a hitch. Every newspaper within a radius of several hundred miles of the lonely spot near Coke, Kansas, where the Texas Special was looted, screamed the next day on the train robbery, in spite of the fact that the World War was at its peak, and the papers were devoting column after column of space to describe the activity on the battlefront. To show how perfectly the bandits' system of calling to each other by number worked out, one large daily the next morning carried a double streamer across the front page which read, 3 wounded when 13 bandits loot Katy Flyer. Hey everybody, welcome back from the break. Thank you for giving our sponsors just a moment of your time. I also wanted to take just a moment to remind you that Kinda Murdery is a support community for people with disabilities, physical or otherwise. So if you or someone you know is struggling with a disability or with their mental health and you need someone to talk to, feel free to reach out to the show, kindamurdery@gmail.com or at kindamurdery on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and yes, now on TikTok. And a reminder that if you're in acute crisis, there is a new 3-digit phone number you can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's 988. And if you call 988, you can receive counseling for suicidal, substance abuse, or mental health related issues. So if you're in a dark place and you need to speak to someone, please remember that there are so many people who care about you and dial 988. Thank you for giving me a moment to share that. And now I wanted to shout out Kristen Straley, maiden name Piper, who reached out to tell me that she loves the show, but more to the point, she wanted to share that she is the great-granddaughter of Milo Piper, mysterious chauffeur slayer of tennis star Frida Weichman from the Borland Woods mystery episode with my buddy Nick View that came out on May 22nd. If you haven't heard it, go listen. But I was really excited to hear from Kristen because it's always a treat to meet wonderful new people, and also because as a true crime podcaster, I feel like it's important to remember that the stories I tell and the events that take place are not fictional. They happen to real people, and they reverberate through the decades. The Borland Woods mystery happened 106 years ago, and yet, for me, it came alive just yesterday. Tragedy notwithstanding, living history is pretty darn neat. All right, let's get back to the story of Dale Jones and Marjie Dean. The theory that 13 persons had actually participated in the holdup was advanced the night of the holdup by Sheriff M.A. Stevenson of Osawatomie after he had conducted a preliminary investigation into the robbery and talked to several of the passengers on board. Nor was this theory discarded by other investigators, including those assigned to the case by the United States Post Office Department for several months to come. So thoroughly had Dale's bandits followed his instructions. For days following the night of the holdup, the brushwood bordering the Meridazine River was combed by more than 250 searchers who volunteered to aid Sheriff Stevenson in the manhunt. The only trace of the bandits' trail was found when a party of searchers discovered a small safe on a farm 10 miles southeast of Paola, Kansas. It was identified as one taken from the mail car. The door had been blown open with nitroglycerin. When Dale Jones led his men into their raid on the passenger train near Coke, Kansas that night, he laid them open to the vengeance of the United States government and brought the wrath of the post office inspectors down on their heads. He knew at the time he talked to his subjects back there in the house on Wyandotte Street that few criminals ever escaped the relentless manhunters in the employ of Uncle Sam. But criminals, universally wise as they are to what inevitably happens to a man who tries to beat the law, are the easiest persons in the world to influence. Dale Jones' gang of desperados accepted the word of their chief as gospel. They believed him when Jones assured them he was leading his gang into a new racket from which they would reap greater harvests with less danger involved. But now that the job had been pulled, and the post office authorities, with that determination which characterizes that group of men and sets the service in a class by itself when it starts to track out criminals, took up the trail of Dale Jones and his pack of marauders. To California, down through New Mexico, across Texas, into the Arizona desert, back through Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas, over the very route taken by the gang on that fateful night of the train robbery, 2 men trailed Dale Jones and his 7 Confederates. The bandits had no time to engage in robbery or plunder. All their days and nights were occupied with one problem, a problem that remained with them always, the problem of escaping Uncle Sam's manhunters. The robbers were trailed into Colorado, forced to take to the open road again, and were followed by the post office inspectors back through the once famous Missouri Badlands and into Kansas City. The old rendezvous in the hills was watched day and night by federal officers, having been discovered by 2 of them, Donaldson and Edmondson. The bandit gang moved back into the house on Wyandotte Street, barricaded the place where they stayed, cooped up like so many rats, creeping out only when the need for food necessitated it. After weeks of confinement in the house that had so far escaped the notice of the manhunters, Dale Jones' love for excitement again manifested itself. He needed action and adventure, so he proceeded to look for it. Disguised as a woman, he went out each evening, called the police, and gave them tips on where Dale Jones might be found. And this is pretty comic if you think about it. Here we have one of the most notorious bandits, bank robbers, and train robbers in American history, and his go-to move is to dress up like a woman and go into town to find information on what the police are doing or to give them false tips from, I guess, a payphone. It's also pretty funny that he didn't send his girlfriend/common-law wife, Marjie Dean, out to make the phone calls as a woman. He was clearly very confident in how convincing his fake woman's voice was. Instead, like the Fox Robin Hood in the Disney animated movie Robin Hood, or like Tyler Perry in one of the Medea movies, he preferred to don drag, use a fake woman's voice, and do the chicanery himself. I suppose this was because of his constant need for adrenaline and danger. All right, back to the story. After phoning in a fake tip about himself, Dale Jones would then stand on the street corner and watch the car of the short call officers as it sped through the crowded city to the fake address where a mysterious informer had said that he, Dale Jones, was hiding. Each time one of these telephone messages was received, a squadron of officers was dispatched immediately to the address given as the hiding place of the notorious bandit. The Kansas City police were being run ragged. There was nothing to do but to send out a carload of policemen every time one of these calls came in, as there was no telling when one of them might prove to be the real thing. There was too much money on the bandit's head to miss a chance of capturing him. But even these dangerous pranks were growing tame for the daring robber chief. So one night, tired of watching police cars run for nothing, Dale slipped away from the house on Wyandotte Street and, going to a telephone pay station, called the police headquarters. It was about 10 o'clock. Chief of Detectives I.B. Walston happened to be on duty when the call came in. Removing the receiver from the hook, he barked the usual "Detective Bureau" into the telephone's mouthpiece, little anticipating who the caller was. "Hello, that you, Ike?" came the laughing voice of Dale Jones. There was no mistaking that voice once you'd heard it. "You can find me at 1500 Wyandotte Street in 30 minutes, but don't send your men any sooner than that." Somehow, Walston knew that Dale Jones was not lying when he added that he'd been hiding in Wyandotte Street for the past several weeks, and he felt confident that the youthful robber chief would be in the jail the next morning. But again, the swiftness with which Dale Jones moved had been underestimated, and this time Chief of Detectives Walston himself was to blame when the raiding party returned to headquarters empty-handed, but showing every sign of having been interestingly engaged out on Wyandotte Street. Walston sent out 8 men when he should have sent out 50. The officers found the house all right, and they also found something else. 8 police officers stood about the same chance of beating the Jones-Lewis bandits in an open gun battle as so many high school boys, even when the bandits refused to shoot to kill. By the way, that passage comes directly from True Detective magazine in January 1929. Please don't think that I am denigrating the skills of law enforcement officers. Dale had rushed back to the house after calling the chief of detectives with the tip on his gang and warned the men that cops were wise. The two cars in which the bandits had traveled over half the United States in their flight from federal officers were in readiness long before the party of officers arrived. They now stood waiting, with Eva Lewis at the wheel of one and Marjie ready to drive the other machine out of Kansas City as she once had driven the same big Marmon out of Los Angeles. The house occupied by the bandits sat in the middle of a block with vacant lots on either side. Tall bushes and weeds had grown up around the house, and in these the 6 male members of the gang concealed themselves to wait for the arrival of the officers. They did not have to wait long, for within 10 minutes after the chief of detectives received Dale's message, 2 police cars came to a halt in front of the rambling old house. 8 policemen leapt from the cars and began surrounding the place, some heading straight for the front door and others circling toward the backyard. Those who had started from the rear of the house were greeted with a fusillade of shots from the direction of the weed patch. The officers returned the fire, but their shooting was ineffective because they had only the shadows to aim at. If the bandits had cared to do so, they might easily have killed at least half of the 8 officers who stood there in the open, pumping shot after shot into the patch of high weeds concealing their quarry. The battle lasted perhaps 3 minutes, until the gang, fearing the shooting would bring other carloads of officers swooping down on them from all directions, took to the waiting automobiles and sped away. The 2 bandit cars, driven by Marjie Dean and Eva Lewis, headed out of Kansas City and sped toward Colorado. J.M. Donaldson and J.W. Admonson, post office inspectors who had been trailing the bandits, were notified of the gun battle on Wyandotte Street, and then warned officers all along the line to be on the lookout for the robbers. Donaldson and Admonson were on the road in a fast automobile in less than half an hour. Reports came in all that night from towns between Kansas City and Denver, telling of a night watchman here and a villager there who had seen 2 cars speeding on toward the Colorado line. But the 2 motor cars bearing the most desperate gang of criminals Missouri and Colorado has known since the reign of terror spread by the James Boys shortly after the Civil War sped through the night unchallenged. A few miles behind, post office inspectors Admonson and Donaldson followed at full speed. The bandits arrived in Denver early on the morning of September 9th. The gang split. Jones, Marjie Dean, and Kansas City Blackie took a furnished apartment at 815 West 17th Street, Denver. Other members of the gang took up quarters elsewhere. The post office inspectors drove into Denver less than an hour later, and by mid-afternoon of the same day, the hiding place of the bandit leader was located by the federal officers. The arrest of Jones, Blackie, and Marjie could now be effected at any moment, but when Uncle Sam's men go out after a gang of crooks, they mean to bring in the whole gang, not part of it. Donaldson and Admonson were biding their time, waiting for all the members of the band to assemble before attempting a capture. The post office inspectors did not believe Jones and his 2 companions would make an effort to leave Denver at a time when every law enforcement officer as well as filling station attendant from Kansas City to the Pacific Coast had been furnished with photographs of Dale Jones and others of the gang. But yet again, the daring of this reckless youth who led the pack of robbers was not taken into consideration. On Thursday, September 12th, Dale Jones, Marjie Dean, and Blackie Lancaster walked boldly out of the front door of their apartment house, stepped into the car that had been left parked on the curb for 3 days, and drove out of Denver. Donaldson and Admonson followed them, trailing the bandit car toward Colorado Springs. By some arrangement, the details of which have never been learned, the Jones party met the rest of the gang on a road just outside Colorado Springs. The 2 post office inspectors who were following the Jones car passed the 2 machines containing the entire bandit gang. Jones and Lewis climbed out of their cars and walked a little way from the rest of the gang, engaging for some time in conversation. Returning to the cars, Jones and Lewis started on toward the city, with the machine in which Lewis rode taking the lead. The 2 bandit cars passed the machine of the post office inspectors and continued at a leisurely pace. A little farther on, Jones stopped his car because of tire trouble. He removed his hat and coat. The other bandit car was now out of sight. Having entered Colorado Springs, Donaldson and Admonson also stopped their car. Jones looked up from his work occasionally and watched the government officers. He looked directly into their faces. His car ready, Dale got in beside Marjie Dean with Blackie in the rear seat and started on toward Colorado Springs. But just before the car approached the first city street, Dale swung the big automobile around and pointed its nose back toward Denver. His car met the post office inspectors, who were trailing along at a safe distance. The officers also turned their car around and trailed Jones back to the house in Denver. The next day, Friday, September 13th, Friday the 13th, folks, Dale Jones again started for Colorado Springs, accompanied by Marjie and Blackie. At a filling station just outside the city limits of Colorado Springs, Dale stopped for gas. A woman was getting gas for her car just ahead of the bandit car. The proprietor of the oil station, standing in the door of the small office, looked at the waiting automobile and recognized the driver as the man with the big price on his head, Dale Jones. Pretending he had not noticed the bandits or recognized them as such, the proprietor of the station walked to the side of the attendant serving the woman customer and gave a whispered order to the workman to delay her car as long as possible. He then walked back into the office and called the Colorado Springs police. Chief of Detectives John Rowan, known throughout the state of Colorado as a two-gun man, with a handful of picked men, drove out to the filling station to arrest Dale Jones. The chief of police of Colorado Springs followed. Rowan took no precautions, but without the least hesitation drove directly up within a few feet of the car in which sat the dreaded gang leader. Rowan's car swerved sharply to the right, and he drove a few yards away from the station, then circled the bandit car. The machine bearing the chief of police and several other Colorado Springs officers circled Dale's car from the opposite side. Foreseeing what was soon to follow, the proprietor of the station climbed into the car beside the woman who had made it possible to hold the bandits until the police could arrive, and drove her machine out of the danger range. Again, the car of Chief Rowan circled the bandit car, then headed straight for Dale Jones, who was taking in the situation calmly, almost gloatingly. A strange little smile lit up his boyish face. He knew the time had come, at last, when he must kill or be killed. There was no time to think of trials now or to count the chances. As Rowan's car drove up within a few yards of Dale Jones' big Marmon standing there beside the gasoline pump, the detective's chauffeur killed the engine. Chief of Detectives Rowan leapt out of the front seat and started walking toward the filling station. Jones sat in his car. Both hands were resting on the steering wheel. His eyes were mere slits peering out from under tightly drawn lids. Rowan approached within 20 feet of the bandit car. Then, with a movement that was unseen by any of the dozen officers and spectators who watched with bated breaths, the right hand of Dale Jones shot beneath his coat and under his left arm. The hand came out even more quickly, holding a smoking automatic. His first shot struck Chief Rowan in the head, killing him instantly. The quiet neighborhood in which the filling station was situated was instantly converted into a veritable battlefield. A police officer nearly half a block away raised a rifle to his shoulder and aimed it at Dale Jones, the murderer. Dale pointed his gun at the officer and the rifle was lowered. Jones turned away without killing him. Detective John Riley drew his gun and started to fire from the hip. Blackie Lancaster shot off the thumb and forefinger of the hand holding the gun, and the detective's weapon dropped to the ground. Marjie Dean was lying on the floor of the car, firing shot after shot. The bandits were protected to some degree by the brick pillars supporting the shed over the gasoline pumps. The officers were in the open, and because of their unprotected stations, they were unable to score a hit, as the problem of keeping out of range of the constant hail of lead pumped in their direction by the bandits was a serious one. The officers were running for cover and had ceased firing. This lapse gave Jones the chance he'd been waiting for. Emptying his gun at the retreating police officers, the bandit started the motor of his car and sped out of the driveway of the filling station. He headed back for Denver. The bandit car was running low on fuel. A new supply of gas was the great consideration of the moment, and nearing Denver, Jones passed a filling station and turned in. The place was locked. Dale got out of the car and walked up to the barred door, intending to break in. Motorcycle patrolman Luther McMahill, riding along the road, discovered the party of apparent gasoline thieves. He approached the car and spoke to Marjie Dean. Dale Jones, standing near the door of the oil station, preparing to break in the door with a hammer, turned when he heard the voice of the motorcycle officer. For the second time that day, the right hand of Dale Jones shot beneath his left arm, and again the hand came out holding a large pistol, spitting instant death. The body of Officer McMahill was found 2 days later. It lay in a road ditch face downward within a half-mile of the place where he was murdered. In the meantime, almost at the same hour of the Colorado Springs battle, the Denver police were being engaged in another gunfight with other members of the same gang. Frank Lewis, assuming charge of the rest of the gang after leaving Jones the day before, had returned to Denver and had taken refuge at the home of some of his wife's people. The two post office inspectors who had missed Dale on his second trip out of Denver had discovered the hiding place of Lewis and the remainder of the gang. Following the custom of the post office authorities, Admonson and Donaldson notified the police of their discovery and waited nearby for arrests to be made, taking no active part in the capture themselves. The house in which Lewis and the gang were staying was completely surrounded by police officers, their guns in their hands. The policemen watched Eva Lewis and Cheryl walk from the house and get in a car parked at the curb. Still, the officers waited. In about 5 minutes, Frank Lewis came out of the house and started for the machine occupied by his sister and Cheryl. The police opened fire. Cheryl, sitting at the wheel, pressed the starter and the motor roared. He let the machine into gear and steered the car at a breakneck speed through a convenient alley, the only avenue of escape not barred by police officers. Eva lost her hat when the automobile lunged violently forward in high gear. Cheryl drove with one hand and fired over his shoulder with the other. Eva did not carry a gun. When the car in which the bandit and cabaret singer were speeding to safety disappeared down the alleyway, several of the officers started in pursuit. Others remained at the scene of the shooting to determine the number of casualties, if any. There were 2. Detectives Harry Lane and Frank Cole had been hit by bullets from Cheryl's gun. Eva and Cheryl eluded their pursuers, but every road leading out of Denver was manned by National Guardsmen who had orders to shoot to kill. The car in which Eva Lewis and Cheryl rode was riddled with bullet holes. A great number of shots were fired after the fleeing bandit and the pretty girl with him when they dashed away from the house in Denver. One bullet had struck the motor, and Cheryl was having trouble in keeping his lead over the carloads of officers that were in hot pursuit of him. And we're going to pause our story right here in the middle of an epic car chase with our bandit anti-heroes running from the police. Everybody loves a car chase, right? Well, if you want to get back to it, make sure to tune in this Thursday, August 18th, for the thrilling conclusion of Killer Couple, Natural Born Lovers, Dale Jones and Marjie Dean, where I'll be picking this story up right in the middle of a car chase. I don't know about you, but I cannot wait to hang out again on Thursday. Until then, I'm Zevon Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery. If you've enjoyed today's Kinda Murdery, please tell your friends and family, tell strangers, leave a review. It's the best way to ensure that I can keep telling that special brand of bizarre and terrible tales that you'll only find here on Kinda Murdery.